Alina was not born into money, but she was born with a heart full of love. She had worked hard all her life, first as a school teacher, then later running community programs for orphans. She believed in kindness, in giving without expecting anything, in return, and in the simple power of doing good. But life had not always been kind to her. After years of struggling with relationships and finances, she finally met Richard Montgomery, a man who lived in a completely different world. Richard was a billionaire. He was the CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. His name was always in the headlines, attached to luxury cars, mansions, and global deals. He was handsome, confident, and always in control. People respected him, but most feared him more. When Richard and Alina met at a charity event, it seemed like an unlikely match. She wore a simple dress, while he arrived in a custom-tailored suit with a private security team. But something about her sincerity caught his attention. She wasn't like the women he usually met. No designer bags, no fake compliments. She asked him real questions, and she listened when he spoke. At first, it was just casual. Richard saw Alina as different, maybe even refreshing. For Alina, Richard was someone who offered comfort, security, and a life where she wouldn't have to worry about every bill. Their relationship moved quickly, and before long, they were married in a small but beautiful ceremony. Alina wore her mother's old wedding ring. Richard gifted her a house the size of a castle. But soon, the cracks began to show. Richard wasn't cruel in the beginning, just distant. He worked late, traveled constantly, and had little interest in talking about emotions. Alina tried to adjust. She filled the empty spaces in their giant house with books, plants, and soft music. She decorated the rooms with warmth, hoping it would bring them closer. But Richard was always focused on business. His idea of love was buying her expensive gifts and showing her off at high-profile events. For a while, Alina convinced herself this was enough. What Richard didn't understand was that Alina had always dreamed of being a mother. Even before she met him, she had visited orphanages and donated her time to children who had no one. She believed every child deserved love, no matter where they came from. After 3 years of a cold, childless marriage, Alina made a decision that would change everything. She visited a local orphanage she had once worked with, met a little girl who captured her heart. Her name was Ava. She was quiet, reserved, and had the saddest eyes Alina had ever seen. Ava was 8 years old and had been through more in her short life than most adults. Her mother had died of illness. Her father was unknown. She had bounced from one foster home to another, never staying long enough to feel safe. Ava was black, and most of the adoptive families who visited the center overlooked her. Alina didn't see color. She saw a child who needed love. From the moment Alina knelt in front of her and asked if she liked books, Ava nodded softly. They sat and read a story together, and by the time the afternoon sun faded, Alina knew she wanted to bring Ava home. When Alina told Richard about the adoption, his reaction was colder than she expected. "Are you joking?" he asked sharply. "Why would you bring a random child into our lives? And a black girl? What will people think?" Alina was stunned. "She's not a random child. She's a beautiful girl who needs a home." "And since when do you care what people think?" Richard stood up, clearly frustrated. "I care because we have a name, a reputation. This is not some charity house. What will my business partners say when they find out I've adopted a kid from the streets?" Alina's heart broke. "It's not about your image, Richard. It's about giving someone a chance. That girl is talented and smart and just needs a little love." Richard didn't want to hear it. He stormed out of the room, and for days they didn't speak. But Alina had made up her mind. She returned to the orphanage and filled out the papers. The process took weeks, but finally Ava came home. Alina decorated a room for her with pastel walls, fairy lights, and bookshelves filled with stories. She made sure Ava had everything she needed: warm clothes, good food, and the comfort of someone who cared. Richard barely spoke to the girl. He would pass her in the hallway without a glance. During meals, he stayed on his phone while Ava ate quietly. Alina tried to keep things balanced, but the tension was clear. Richard didn't hide his feelings. He made sarcastic remarks about Ava's background, her skin color, and her silence. He said she would never fit in with their world. Sometimes, even in front of guests, he would make comments that left Ava shrinking in her chair. Alina stood up for her every time. But it was not enough to stop the damage. One day, Richard threw a dinner party for some business leaders. Lena asked Ava to join them at the table. She wore a simple dress and sat quietly, watching the adults talk and laugh. Then someone asked, "Is she your daughter?" Lena smiled and nodded. "Yes, she's our daughter." Richard coughed and said, "Her daughter. Actually, I had nothing to do with that decision." The room went silent. Ava looked down at her plate, not touching a bite. Lena's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed strong for Ava. After the guests left, Elena confronted him. "How could you say that in front of her?" Richard shrugged. "I'm just being honest. That girl will never be a Montgomery. She doesn't belong." "You don't know her," Elena said, her voice shaking. "She's kind and brave and smart. But you're too busy judging her skin and her past to see that." "She's not our blood," Richard said coldly. "Family isn't about blood," Elena replied. "It's about love." Ava heard everything. From that night on, she stopped speaking much. She went to school, did her homework, and disappeared into her room. She stayed out of Richard's way, but the sadness in her eyes deepened. She started waking up at night with nightmares. Sometimes Elena found her crying in her sleep, whispering that she didn't belong. But there was one thing that brought light into Ava's world. In one of the unused rooms of the mansion, covered in dust and forgotten by the rest of the household, stood a grand piano. It was beautiful black, shiny, and silent. No one had played it in years. One day, while hiding from Richard's anger after he yelled at her for spilling juice on the carpet, Ava opened the door to the piano room and stepped inside. She pressed a key, then another. The sound was soft. It's magical. She came back the next day, then again and again. The piano became her friend, her secret. She didn't know how to play at first. She just pressed the keys and listened. Then she started to recognize patterns. She remembered sounds. Her small fingers moved faster, more confidently. She started composing her own little melodies, simple at first, then deeper. More emotional, Elena found her one day, sitting at the piano, eyes closed, playing something so beautiful it gave her goosebumps. She didn't say anything. She just watched, then quietly walked away and bought her piano books, headphones, and notebooks for music. Ava had found her voice, not with words, but with music. Richard remained cold. He never noticed the piano. He never asked about the music. To him, Ava was still a mistake, but the world was about to hear her story. Ava slowly began to disappear into the background of the Grand Montgomery mansion. The house was huge, almost too big for just 3 people to live in. It had marble floors, tall windows, golden lamps, and walls covered with expensive paintings. But for Ava, it never felt like home. Every corner reminded her that she didn't belong. Every time she passed Richard in the hallway, he looked through her like she was invisible. Sometimes he gave her sharp looks, but most of the time, he ignored her completely. Elena tried her best to make Ava feel like part of the family. She helped her with school, made her favorite meals, and read her bedtime stories even when Ava was too sad to listen. But Elena was just one person, and the sadness inside Ava was growing deeper with time. At school, she was polite but quiet. Teachers said she was smart, but she didn't talk much. She didn't make many friends either. Most kids didn't know how to approach the shy girl who always kept to herself. Some were curious about her, but others whispered things behind her back. She heard it all, even if she never reacted. Her silence became her armor. But every day, as soon as Ava came home, she slipped away into her secret place, the music room. It was the only place in the entire house where she felt free. No one came looking for her there. The grand piano, which had once been covered in dust, was now polished and loved. Her small hands danced over the keys like they were made for it. She taught herself songs just by listening. She created her own melodies when she didn't know the notes. Sometimes her music sounded like joy, other times like sorrow, but every note was full of truth. Elena noticed the change. She never interrupted when Ava played, but she always stayed close, listening from the hallway. The sound of that music brought tears to her eyes. It was as if the girl who never spoke was pouring her entire heart into the piano. Alina knew there was something magical happening, something rare. She bought Ava more music books and even contacted a local piano teacher, but Ava said no. She didn't want anyone else. She only wanted to play what she felt. Richard, on the other hand, couldn't care less. He hated the sound of the piano. It reminded him that there was someone in his house. He didn't accept. Every time he heard Ava playing, he closed the door to his office. One day, during a business call, he stormed into the music room and shouted at her. "Enough of this noise," he barked. "Do you think this is your personal stage? People like you should be grateful you even have a roof over your head?" Ava didn't say a word. She didn't cry. She just stood up and quietly walked out of the room. After that, she stopped playing when Richard was home, waited until he left for work or traveled for business. Then the music would return, soft, gentle, and full of unspoken words. Alina was furious at Richard. "How can you be so cruel to a child?" She asked him one night. "Do you even hear yourself?" "She's not my child," he said coldly. "And I don't want music echoing through my house like I'm running a daycare." "This house is as much hers as it is yours," Alina snapped. "And she has more heart than you ever will," Richard laughed. "She's a charity case, Alina. One day, you'll realize it." But Alina didn't back down. She promised herself that no matter how Richard behaved, she would protect Ava. She believed that love could heal even the deepest wounds. And slowly, Ava began to open up just a little. She smiled when Alina brought her cocoa, humming songs when she walked down the hall. She even asked for a notebook to write her own music. She filled the pages with drawings of keys, notes, and tiny words that matched the emotions in her melodies. One day at school, her teacher heard her humming a tune in class. After the lesson, the teacher pulled her aside and asked if she played music. Ava nodded shyly. The teacher encouraged her to audition for the school's talent show. At first, Ava said no. She didn't want to stand in front of people. She didn't want them staring at her or asking questions. But the idea stayed in her mind. At home, she told Alina about it. Alina's eyes lit up. "You should do it," she said gently. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just let them hear your heart," Ava agreed. She practiced in secret for days, choosing a song she had written herself. It had no title, but it was full of all the feelings she never said out loud. On the night of the talent show, she wore a simple white dress. Her classmates didn't expect much from the quiet girl who barely spoke, but when she sat at the piano and began to play, the entire auditorium went silent. Every note held emotion. Teachers looked at each other in surprise. Parents leaned forward in their seats. By the time Ava finished, the room erupted in applause. Someone recorded her performance and shared it online. It didn't go viral, but it reached a few local musicians and teachers who started asking about her. Alina received emails from people who wanted to offer lessons, scholarships, or invitations to music programs. But Alina protected Ava's space. She thanked them but said Ava was still finding her path. When Richard heard about the performance, he rolled his eyes. "She played at a school show," he scoffed. "It's not like she's Mozart. She's special," Alina said. "She's a phase," Richard replied. "Let her enjoy it before the world shows her what reality is." But Richard's world was slowly beginning to change. His company was facing trouble. New competitors were rising, investors were nervous, and journalists were digging into his personal life. One of them even asked about his adopted daughter in an interview. Richard brushed it off with a dismissive laugh. "My wife has a big heart," he said. "She adopted a girl who needed help. I support it." From a distance, Alina saw the clip. Ava saw it too. It stung, but Ava didn't cry this time. Instead, she went to the piano and played something new. It was angry, fast, full of sharp notes and sudden silence. Alina stood by the door, her heart breaking and swelling at the same time. Ava was finding her strength. Soon after, Alina received an invitation to a major charity gala. It was a big event. Politicians, celebrities, and global business leaders were expected to attend. Richard was one of the hosts, and the event was being held in their mansion. When Alina suggested that Ava perform a small piano piece, Richard laughed in her face. "Absolutely not," he said. This is a high-profile event, not some talent show. She has a gift, Alina said. She has no place in front of my guests, Richard snapped. They come from a different world. They won't understand, and I won't be humiliated. You mean you won't understand? Alina said softly. Richard glared at her. Don't push me on this, Alina. But she didn't back down. She quietly made the arrangements without telling him. Ava was nervous, but when Alina asked her if she wanted to play, she nodded. Only if you're there, she whispered. I'll be right beside you, Alina promised. The night of the gala arrived. The mansion was glowing with lights. The driveway was lined with luxury cars. Guests in suits and gowns filled the ballroom, sipping champagne and making polite conversation. A live band played soft music in the background. Richard moved through the crowd, shaking hands and posing for photos. He had no idea what Alina had planned. A few hours into the evening, the music stopped and the host made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a very special young talent, Ava Montgomery. Richard turned sharply, his face draining of color. What is this? He whispered. Alina smiled calmly. Just wait. Ava walked into the ballroom, dressed in a soft blue gown. Her hands trembled, but her face was calm. She sat at the grand piano in the corner of the room. People turned to look, unsure of what to expect. Da-da, some whispered. A few raised their eyebrows. Then Ava began to play. The room changed instantly. Conversation stopped. Glasses were set down. Eyes turned, locked onto the girl who spoke without words. Her music flowed like a river, sometimes gentle, sometimes wild, always full of truth. Her fingers moved with confidence, her body swayed with feeling, and her eyes stayed closed, as if she was somewhere else entirely. Richard stood frozen. The same child he had mocked and ignored was now holding the attention of the most powerful people in the room. Some guests were wiping tears. Others were recording the performance on their phones. When Ava finished, there was a moment of deep silence. Then, a thunderous applause shook the room. One guest, a world-famous conductor, pushed through the crowd and approached her. Who taught you that? He asked no one, Ava said softly. I just play what I feel. He looked at her like he had seen a miracle. Alina walked over and hugged Ava tightly. Richard stood still, lost for words, as cameras flashed and guests rushed to congratulate the little girl he once called a mistake. Ava didn't just play music that night. She shattered walls, broke silence, and told the world exactly who she was, and the world was ready to listen. After that night at the gala, everything began to change, slowly but surely. Ava's performance had touched something deep inside every person who listened. Even those who didn't understand music well knew they had witnessed something rare. There was something special about the way her fingers moved across the piano keys. It wasn't just skill. It was emotion, memory, pain, and hope all rolled into music that felt alive. Guests who had once looked at her like a quiet, unwanted child were now coming up to her with tears in their eyes. Some couldn't believe she had never had a teacher. Others were stunned to learn she was only 12. A few well-known artists who had been invited to the gala were so impressed they asked Alina if Ava would be performing anywhere else soon. Her video was shared online that very night and began to gain views fast. Strangers commented about her talent, her story, and how deeply her music had moved them. But even with all the attention, Ava stayed quiet. She didn't chase fame. She didn't brag about what she had done. She just wanted to go home, hug her mom, and return to her music room where she felt most safe. For her, the stage had been frightening, like the lights, the eyes watching, the pressure. It had taken all her courage to sit down and play. But when her fingers touched the keys, she had forgotten her fear. She had poured out everything she had been holding inside for years. That night, when she went to bed, she whispered softly, "Thank you," to no one in particular. Maybe to the piano. Maybe to Alina. Maybe to something higher. Richard, however, didn't know what to feel. He had watched the whole performance from a distance. At first, he was angry that Alina had gone behind his back. Angry that Ava had stolen the attention of his guests. Angry that he had no control over the moment. But as the applause grew louder, and he saw important people, his investors, business friends, even celebrities stand and clap for her. Something inside him shifted. He wasn't ready to admit it, not even to himself, but he felt something strange, pride and guilt. He had mocked this girl. He had dismissed her completely. Now the world was watching her, not him. After the gala, guests kept asking Richard about Ava. Some praised him for raising such a talented child. Others offered to connect her with international music schools. Richard smiled politely, but he didn't know what to say. Inside, he was shaken. For the first time, he wasn't the star of his own event. That night, the house was quiet. Alina tucked Ava into bed and kissed her forehead. "You were amazing," she said. Ava gave a small smile. "Did he like it?" Alina hesitated, then nodded. "I think he didn't know what to feel. Deep down, I believe he saw what I see. Every day." Ava didn't ask more. She just turned to the side and closed her eyes. But Richard couldn't sleep. He walked into his study, poured himself a drink, and stared out the window for a long time. Remembered the words he had said to Alina months ago. That girl will never be a Montgomery. Ow. Everyone in the country knew her name. She had made him look foolish not by words, not by anger, but with music. Music so powerful that it made the room cry. In the days that followed, reporters started calling. They wanted interviews with Ava. They asked about her past, her talent, and how she learned to play so beautifully. Lena answered most of the questions. Herself, she was careful. She didn't want the media turning Ava's life into a circus. Offers came in too from music academies, record labels, and even film studios asking if Ava could score a soundtrack. But Alina knew Ava wasn't ready. For all that, she protected her fiercely. Meanwhile, Richard was dealing with something else. At work, his investors were more interested in Ava than in his next business plan. One of them even joked, "You've got the real genius in your house, Richard." It was meant to be funny, but it cut deep. For a man who had always been the most important person in every room, this was a new kind of pain. And for the first time in years, he felt small. He started to watch Ava more closely, quietly, from a distance. He saw the way she gently moved through the house. How she always waited until he left before playing the piano. How she hugged Alina with such deep trust. He realized she was afraid of him. Not because of anything she had done, but because of everything he had said and how coldly he had treated her. He thought back to the night she first came home. How he had mocked Elena's decision. How he had refused to call Ava his daughter. He remembered her quiet face at the dinner table when he told the guests that Ava wasn't really his. The memory burned in his mind like a wound that refused to close. One morning, Richard did something he had never done before. He waited until Alina left for the store. Then, he walked toward the music room slowly. Ava was sitting at the piano, writing something in her notebook. When she saw him, she stood up immediately, unsure of what to do. He cleared his throat. You played well the other night," he said awkwardly. Ava didn't answer. He tried again. "I didn't know you could do all that," she stared. At the floor, Richard sighed. "Look, I've been wrong. About a lot of things. About you." There was silence. He stepped closer. "I know I haven't made this house feel like a home for you. I know I've said terrible things. Can't take them back, but I can try to be better." Ava looked up, unsure if he meant it. He swallowed hard. "Can I hear you play? Just once, if you want." Ava didn't respond at first. Then slowly, she sat back down and placed her hands on the keys. She didn't play the song from the gala. Instead, she played something soft, uncertain, like a question. It wasn't her best performance, but it was honest. Richard stood quietly, listening. When she finished, he clapped softly. It was the first time she had seen him smile at her. "I'm sorry," he said. Ava didn't say anything. But for the first time, she didn't run from him either. That evening, when Elena returned, Ava told her everything. Elena was surprised and moved. "He apologized?" She asked. Ava nodded, and he listened. Elena smiled. "That's more than I ever hoped for." From that point on, things didn't change overnight, but they did change. Richard began joining them for dinner. He asked Ava how her day was. He complimented her music, even bought her a new set of headphones and a better chair for the piano. He wasn't perfect. Sometimes his old habits showed. But he was trying, and Ava noticed. She started talking more at home. She laughed sometimes. She even asked Richard questions about his work, and he told her stories from his early days in business. She began to trust him, not completely. But step by step, then came the letter. It arrived in a fancy envelope with golden edges. Alina opened it and gasped. It was an invitation from one of the top music conservatories in Europe. They had seen Ava's performance online and were offering her a full scholarship. The letter called her a rare and gifted artist. Alina showed it to Ava, who read it twice, then looked up in shock. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "You don't have to," Alina said gently. "But this is a big opportunity. It's your choice." They discussed it for days. Richard joined in. For the first time, the three of them sat around the kitchen table as a family. Richard didn't try to control the decision. He just listened. "I'll go," Ava finally said, "but only for a short time. And only if you visit me, we will," Alina promised. "Always. I'll even fly the plane myself if I have to," Richard joked. Trying to lighten the moment, Ava giggled. It was the sound of healing before she left for Europe. The town organized a small concert in her honor. Ava performed for a crowd of people who had followed her story online. She played her original music, but she ended with something new, a piece called Home. It was soft and strong, full of emotion. As the last note rang through the air, everyone stood up and clapped. Richard and Alina were in the front row, holding hands. Ava bowed. This time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like a Montgomery. After Ava left for Europe to attend the prestigious music conservatory, a new chapter began for her in the Montgomery family. The mansion felt quieter, almost empty, without the soft sound of her piano playing filling the halls. Alina missed her daughter deeply, but she was proud. She knew this was the chance Ava needed to grow, to find herself in a world that finally recognized her talent and her spirit. Richard, too, felt the change. The house felt strange without Ava's presence. It was as if the walls were holding their breath, waiting for her return. Slowly, he began to understand just how much Ava had brought light and life into their lives. He had seen her strength, her courage, and the power of her music. And now, he wanted to be part of her journey, not just a distant observer. The conservatory in Europe was a place filled with history and beauty. It stood in an old city with cobblestone streets, centuries-old buildings, and music that floated in the air like magic. Ava felt nervous at first. Everything was new, the language, the culture, the people. She missed Alina terribly, and sometimes, late at night, tears would fall as she thought of home. But whenever she felt alone, she would remember the piano keys, the notes she had played in the mansion, and the promise she had made to herself, to be brave, to learn, to grow. Her teachers at the conservatory were amazed by her natural talent. They told her she had an incredible gift, but also encouraged her to study hard, to learn theory, history, and technique. Ava loved the challenges. She practiced for hours every day, sometimes losing herself in music so deeply that the world outside disappeared. She met other students from all over the world, each with their own stories and dreams. Some were competitive, others kind. For the first time, Ava felt like she belonged to a community that understood her. Back home, Alina stayed, busy with her work and supporting Ava through calls and letters. They shared everything: the new pieces Ava was learning, the concerts she attended, the friends she made. Alina sent packages filled with Ava's favorite snacks, letters from Richard, and photographs of the mansion. But no matter how much they tried to stay connected, the distance was hard. Richard's feelings grew complicated. He wanted to support Ava, but he also struggled with the fact that she was growing up and moving away from his control. Sometimes, he would call her late at night, hoping she would answer, but Ava was often asleep or busy with schoolwork. He started to read books about parenting, about love and forgiveness, trying to become a better father figure. Attending therapy to face his own past, the fears and biases that had made him reject Ava in the beginning. One day, while cleaning Ava's old room, Richard found her music notebook, the one filled with sketches of notes and little poems. He sat down and read through the pages slowly. Each one told a story of sadness, of hope, of dreams. Realized that Ava's music wasn't just talented, was her language, was how she spoke when words failed. And suddenly he wanted to hear more. Alina noticed the change in Richard. He was softer around Ava's things, more patient when they spoke on the phone. He sent letters and gifts that showed he was trying. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Alina believed in second chances. She was glad Ava's father was beginning to see her for who she really was. At the conservatory, Ava was invited to perform in a special concert for visiting guests from around the world. This was her big chance to shine, and she prepared for weeks. She chose a piece she had composed herself, a song about the journey of finding home, of overcoming doubt and embracing strength. The night of the concert was filled with excitement and nerves. Ava stood backstage, her heart pounding. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage and sat at the grand piano. The lights were bright, and the audience was silent. She took a deep breath and let her fingers fly over the keys. The music flowed, carrying the emotions she had kept hidden inside for so long. As the final notes echoed through the hall, the crowd erupted into applause. Ava's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. The concert was a success, and the world began to notice her more. Newspapers wrote about the piano prodigy with a story of courage. Social media shared videos of her performance, praising her talent and grace. Invitations to play at other events arrived, and Ava was becoming a rising star. Despite all the attention, Ava remained humble. She knew her journey was just beginning. She still missed home, missed Alina and Richard, and longed for the comfort of the mansion's music room. But she also knew she was building a future one where she could be proud of herself, no matter what anyone else thought. One afternoon, Ava received an unexpected message from Richard. He wrote that he wanted to visit her in Europe, to see her perform and to talk face to face. Ava was hesitant at first. She remembered the times he had hurt her with words and silence. But she also remembered the moment when he had apologized. And listened to her play, she decided to say yes. When Richard arrived in the old city, Ava felt nervous. Would he judge her? Would he still be distant? But when they met, something shifted. Richard looked at her with pride, tears in his eyes. He said, "I'm sorry for the past, Ava. I'm here now. I want to be part of your life." They spent days together exploring the city, attending concerts, and talking about music and life. Richard listened to Ava's dreams without interruption. He promised to support her in every way he could. For the first time, Ava felt the warmth of a father's love. Not perfect, but real. Back in the mansion, Alina watched the photos Richard sent. She smiled, knowing that her family was healing, piece by piece. She continued to support Ava from afar, always reminding her that no matter where she was loved. As Ava's first year at the conservatory came to an end, she was invited to perform at a special event celebrating her success. This time, Richard and Alina were both in the audience. When Ava walked on stage, she saw their faces shining with pride. She played her heart out, and the applause was louder than ever. After the concert, Ava spoke to the audience about her journey, the struggles, the pain, but most of all, the power of love and music to change lives. Her words moved many, and she became a symbol of hope for children everywhere who felt different or unloved. Ava knew her story wasn't over. She still had challenges ahead, but she had found her voice, her place in the world, and most importantly, her family. She was no longer the quiet girl who had been mocked and ignored. She was a young woman ready to take on the world, one note at a time. As Ava's second year at the music conservatory began, she felt stronger than ever. The shy, quiet girl who once feared being judged was now blossoming into a confident young woman. She had grown so much, not just as a pianist, but as a person. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own worth, and to stand tall even when things were hard. The journey hadn't been easy, but every struggle had made her stronger. Back home, Richard and Alina had changed too. Their family was no longer the one full of distance and cold words. They were learning to love each other more deeply, to forgive mistakes, and to celebrate each other's victories. Richard especially was changing in ways no one had expected. The man who once mocked Ava now proudly called her his daughter. He spoke about her talent at work and with friends, and he made sure to be there for every important moment. Even from far away, Alina was proud of both of them, the daughter she had fought for and the husband had learned to open his heart. Their story was proof that people could change if they truly wanted to. Ava's reputation was growing rapidly. She was invited to perform at music festivals, charity events, and even on television. But despite the growing fame, she stayed grounded. She remembered the words Alina had told her. Never forget where you come from and who loves you. That advice kept Ava humble and kind, even when the spotlight shone bright. One day, Ava received an invitation that took her breath away. A world-famous orchestra in New York had invited her to perform as a soloist in a grand concert. This was the kind of opportunity most musicians only dream of, a chance to play on one of the biggest stages in the world. Ava felt excitement mixed with nervousness. She wanted to say yes. But she also worried about leaving her new home in Europe and facing a crowd so large. After many talks with Alina and Richard, she decided to accept. It was time to share her music with the world. When Ava arrived in New York, everything felt bigger and faster. The city was loud, busy, and full of energy. The concert hall was enormous, with thousands of seats and bright lights that dazzled her eyes. Backstage, she met the conductor and the orchestra members, many of whom were famous musicians. They welcomed her warmly and told her how much they were looking forward to hearing her play. The night of the concert arrived. The hall was packed with music lovers, critics, and reporters. The tension in the air was thick. Ava sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and let her fingers dance over the keys. She played with all her heart, pouring every feeling into the music, the joy, the sadness, the hope. The audience was silent, completely captivated. When she finished, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Standing ovations lasted for minutes. Critics wrote glowing reviews. Interviews followed, with Ava speaking humbly about her journey and her dreams. It was a moment she would never forget. But beyond the applause and fame, Ava's heart was full of something else: gratitude. She knew she didn't reach this point alone. Elena's endless love and sacrifice, Richard's slow but real change, and her own courage had brought her here. And most of all, her music, her true voice, had shown the world who she really was. After the concert, Ava received a surprise visitor. Richard had flown all the way from home to be there. When they met backstage, he hugged her tightly, tears in his eyes. "You were incredible," he said. "I'm so proud of you." Ava smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Dad." That night, they sat together in a quiet cafe, sharing stories and laughter. Richard told Ava how much he had learned about love and acceptance, and how proud he was to call her his daughter. Ava listened, feeling the walls between them breaking down, replaced by trust and hope. Life after the concert was busy. Ava continued to perform around the world, always carrying her family's love in her heart. She started writing new music inspired by her journey, songs about identity, belonging, and courage. Her music touched people everywhere, inspiring many who had felt lost or different. At home, Alina and Richard continued to build a family full of love and respect. They worked together to support Ava's dreams while also healing the wounds of the past. Richard often told friends the story of how his daughter's music had changed his heart, turning him from a man of doubt to a father full of pride. Years passed, and Ava's career flourished. She won awards, released albums, and performed on stages she had only dreamed of. But no matter how far she traveled, or how many people applauded, she never forgot the girl who had been mocked and doubted. She carried her story as a light, hoping to shine for others who needed to believe in themselves. One day, at a special concert to celebrate her success, Ava invited Alina and Richard on stage. She thanked them for their love, their support, and for never giving up on her. The audience cheered, and tears filled the room. It was a moment of victory not just for Ava, but for the whole family. Ava's story became more than just a tale of talent and success. It became a powerful message about acceptance, forgiveness, and the strength of love. The girl who was once Mocked had risen above the pain to become a shining star. And the billionaire husband, who once doubted her, had learned that the greatest wealth wasn't money or power, it was family.